Hello, all, and welcome to the Holistic Ascent Podcast. My name is Lexie Haren, and I'm excited to be back with you here today on this solo episode. So, this is hilarious. This is actually my fifth time recording this freaking episode. So, I hope it's good. I hope it's valuable. And the reason I've recorded it 5 times is just our journey has changed so much since the very first time I recorded this back in, I believe it was last October, talking about our experience with mold exposure in our home, remediation, how we found the mold, all of that. So if you want to follow more along with our journey, aside from this episode, make sure you're following me on Instagram at Haren Holistics, HAREHOLISTICS, and you'll just get all the juicy details on our journey from my Instagram page and my stories specifically. So yeah, the purpose of this episode, I really just want to share with you our now over a year long journey dealing with mold exposure and the related health symptoms that have come along with that for not only myself, but my husband, and then also our pets as well, which is just so crazy to me. I probably could have recorded a 4-hour long episode. In fact, I do have 4 hours of me talking about all this stuff between this episode and the other previous recordings, but I want to make it short and sweet. I want to talk about, first off, how we found the mold in our home, how we discovered that that was contributing to our health issues we were experiencing, the different types of approaches and protocols I've tried, the good, the bad, the ugly, what I recommend, what I don't recommend based on my personal experience, and just the different options that are out there for you if you are dealing with this yourself. Because I know, speaking for myself, there were periods of time over the last year where I just felt totally hopeless. I felt like I was the only one that was going through all of this. I felt like some of the symptoms might have been in my head, but that is so not true. Those are all lies. There are so many individuals out there who are experiencing major health crises related to their environment, related to mold. And don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Not only does it take a toll physically on your body, it's a huge emotional and mental toll as well. And we know that our emotions and our thoughts and all of these things greatly impact our body's ability to heal as well. So it's all connected. This is the Holistic Ascent Podcast. So we talk about holistic approaches to healing where we're looking at all different angles. So I hope you enjoy me diving into my story here. I'll be linking a lot of the resources and things that I note throughout this episode in the show notes, so be sure to check those out if you want some additional resources as well. So flashback just over a year ago, my husband and I had bought our very first home in North Idaho, and we had them do all the different home inspections. We even paid for them to do like an extra mold inspection, quote unquote. Now, knowing later, it's not like a legitimate mold inspection, and they kind of are just like perusing around and they're like, oh, we could use a little more ventilation here in the attic or this, that. And so when the mold inspection came back relatively clear for this house, aside from one problem area in the attic that was where the vent wasn't actually venting from the bathroom to the outside of the house, I was like, okay, I think like we're good to get this house. I think it's going to be all right. I don't think there's a huge mold issue, which was one of my major concerns, but we ended up finding a lot of different issues with this house after we had purchased it. Long story short, I could make a whole nother episode on that as well. But essentially, the first day we moved into our house, we found out it had been smoked in for 50 plus years. And there was not only like nicotine just dripping down the walls in some spots, it just reeked so bad. And I've always been so sensitive to the smell of nicotine, and I did not want that in my house. So we got a couple quotes to get our home remediated from the smoke, and it was going to be upwards of $20,000 for a 900 square foot house to get remediated, which is just absolutely insane. And what they were going to do is they were going to steam mop the walls, and they were going to paint with Kills, and they were going to like fog the house as well. But in my mind, I was like, that's not actually like getting down to the root of like the nicotine stains and the smoke remediation. Like, I think some of this drywall needs to be ripped out. That was really my my own personal opinion on the situation. So we actually ended up taking remediation into our own hands for the smoke situation. And so I actually started steam mopping the walls myself. I painted kills over them. We removed some of the drywall in certain areas where it seemed like the staining was heavier and more impacted. But as we were going through this process, my husband and I both started to experience some different health concerns. For my husband, he had a chronic cough and it had lasted him nearly 3 months before we started kind of getting concerned about it. For myself, I started getting really swollen lymph nodes in my neck and I just felt like my thyroid was aching. Like my whole neck area just kind of felt achy and it felt like something was really off. My sinuses were getting plugged up. And then I started having these really severe bouts of vertigo. And this was kind of a big red flag to me where it's like, okay, something major is going on here. I know I'm stressed because I just moved to a brand new community. I just bought a house. We're doing smoke remediation. There's all of these things going on. So for the longest time, I was like, well, I guess the stress is just really impacting me. And yes, I think that was a huge piece of the puzzle, but there were also some external factors going on here that I think were really exaggerating the symptoms that we were experiencing. And then I started experiencing really significant gut issues. Like I had really terrible stomach cramps. Anytime after I would eat, I would be severely bloated. I had blood in my stool sometimes, which that was honestly like the point where I was like, okay, I really need to figure out what's going on here. I ended up getting a colonoscopy done and everything came back totally clear. They told me I had a great healthy colon and I was like, well, great, but what the heck is going on? Like, I have not changed my diet. I feel like I was the healthiest I was in my 20s 3 months ago. Just 3 months ago, I could eat everything. All my food allergies were gone that I had been struggling with for years. And then suddenly all of this came flooding into my life. And I had all of these crazy symptoms that I just never in my wildest dreams would have related back to mold. Because when I thought of mold symptoms initially, before I knew any of the stuff that I've learned this last year, I would really think of, I would think of the sinus issues. I would think of severe allergies, really. I never really thought of mold impacting my gut and causing vertigo and all of these things. So I never put two and two together until I started traveling at the beginning of last year. And I went to go visit a friend in Sun Valley to go on a ski trip. I had so many different trips. I went up to Alaska. I went to Ohio. There were so many things I was doing, but I noticed that every time I left my house, my symptoms would get significantly lessened. So like the swelling in my lymph nodes would go down. My cough would go away. My husband, when he would come with me on a trip, his cough would go away. My sinuses, there wasn't as much pressure in them. My stomach, even, I could eat more things when I was traveling and do better for the most part. And so I started to think like, wow, I really feel like something in our house is contributing to our illness. Now, I had some different suspicions as I had started doing some of the smoke remediation myself. I found a few spots of concerns in the windowsills. And so I was like, I think our house is really prone to growing mold. We might want to be careful with what temperature we keep the home, all of this. And so I had gotten back from one of my trips and I had all my clothes hanging on this rolling wardrobe rack because we were doing remediation and we just needed to be able to move things really easily. And so I had it in the corner of our bedroom by this one window. And over the span of a week, my clothes that were on this rolling rack were covered in mold. They had all grown mold on one side of them. And I had a little panic attack. I was like, okay, mold is really alive right now in our house. And this is not a good thing. And I think this is really what's contributing to our sickness that we're experiencing. And it all made sense. It was like, okay, we'd go away from the house, we'd go away from the environment, and we would feel better. We would get home, we'd instantly start feeling sick again. Same with the dogs. Their rashes would come back when we got back into the house. It was just this crazy, crazy thing. And we started to just connect all these different dots from the clues around our house, from the travel. And yeah, so I found that mold in that corner. I took some of the window casings off and I just found a ton of black mold in there. Later on down the road, we discovered that some of the windows in our house had been installed incorrectly and there was not a proper sealing around them. And so moisture was just seeping into those walls there. And I'll get more into the remediation and all of that here soon, but that's the first spot that we learned that mold had been growing was by some of the windows. And then we could see that moisture building up anytime it was raining or snowing. We could see a moisture build up on the inside of the window, and we knew that was definitely something to be concerned about. So a few interesting facts about mold. If you didn't know, mold thrives when it is a 50% or higher humidity, and if it's a warm environment. And so I bought these little humidity readers on Amazon. I'll link them in the show notes, but I just put them in every window. And it was really interesting because I could tell which windows were sealed properly and which ones weren't because of the humidity readings. By that one window in the corner of our bedroom where the mold was growing initially that we found, it had a reading of 70% humidity in our house. That's terrifying. I'm in North Idaho. I didn't expect it to be like the tropics up here, like Pacific Northwest weather or like Florida level humidity. Like, this is crazy. And so 70%, that is not good. And so once I started learning about the humidity, the mold growth, when it usually grows, all of that, I bought dehumidifiers and I put them in our house. And so those things were filling up twice a day, and we were getting a gallon plus of moisture that we were dumping into the sink every day from those dehumidifiers. But once we had those running, we were able to get the humidity in our small home down to around 40% humidity, which in my mind, I was like, okay, if we can slow the growth of the mold, that's going to be great until we can fully remediate all of this. So that was kind of the first steps in our mold journey, where we were figuring out what was causing our symptoms, where we were figuring out, okay, there's actually mold in this home. Another major clue we had that the mold issue in our home we had just moved into might have been worse than we thought it was, is we had talked to some of our neighbors, and they had mentioned that the previous owners had to do a ton of mold remediation before they could even put the house on the market. And I don't think it was actually like a true remediation effort. And so that was when I was like, okay, I think this problem is a little bit worse than we think it is. I think we need to do some more digging. At this point in time, we had already hired a contractor to do more of the smoke remediation work for us, and we just decided to do a full remodel on our home. If we were going to be taking down some of the walls to the studs, we might as well reorient our house how we wanted it to be. We might as well put up more stuff in the way that we wanted to. And so we ended up hiring a contractor, and he did an amazing job putting up new walls, reorienting our house for us. We pretty much had all our electrical, all our plumbing, all of that redone. But we never did like full on legitimate mold remediation because I don't think at this time, this was probably about a year ago, maybe a little less than a year ago now, I don't think we realized the severity of the situation. And so if I could go back, I guess 10, 11 months at this point, I would have opted for a full-blown mold inspection where they do all the different tests on the mold in your house so you know what you're dealing with and you know the exact problem areas before we did any of this remodeling. Because unfortunately now at this point, now that we did our mold inspection, like our full-blown mold inspection back in, it was like November now, we have a few areas that we have to tear apart again and redo in our house. So if I could go back, I would have done that day one. I think the reason we didn't do it day one is because I wasn't fully educated on like, what are these different tests? What is the value in them? I just knew there was mold, and I thought that maybe while we were remodeling our house, it would just be taken care of through the process. Maybe it was me being naive and just not wanting to deal with the situation. And I mean, money was a factor too, where it's like, we're already paying for this person to help remodel our house. Like, why would we want to pay for another full remediation on top of that as well? So just lots of different factors in the equation there. So as we were having our house remodeled, we didn't know this, but we had new walls put up. We had the whole new orientation inside the house, and we ended up opting for Venetian plaster on the walls instead of just like a regular paint on the walls. Venetian plaster is supposed to be really great and be resistant to mildew and stuff like that. It almost is like a super smooth concrete on the walls. I'm not a huge fan of the concrete style going around in homes right now, but I like this because it's more of like a natural stone looking feel on our walls, and it's really great. It smelled like they were painting nature on our walls when they were putting the Venetian plaster up. But something that happened after we had our whole interior painted with the Venetian plaster and everything, I started seeing cracks in the ceiling. And I was like, this is literally brand new. We just had this part of our house like redone. It should be great. We found out that our roof had been constantly leaking throughout most of the year while we were doing our remodel. So now we're like halfway through remodel. We have this new beautiful Venetian plaster on our walls. Our walls look brand new. We've got all this tile work going up, all of this. And now we have some active roof leaks that need to be addressed right away. And so there's obviously this moisture that's building up in our attic, and now it's coming in through the ceiling. It's actively dripping into buckets in our living room as we're undergoing this remodel. And that just kind of spurred a whole nother thing for me where I was like, wow, okay, we are not done with the mold situation here. Where there is water and moisture and warmth, there's mold. And so we need to address this. So we had to get a brand new roof put on. And I think this is just how home ownership maybe goes, maybe how construction, remodel stuff goes, but there is always something else to be done and to be addressed. And everything is going to for sure get pushed back because of these things. So amidst this whole situation, we're probably about around fall time last year when we were realizing this, and then we had to get that roof install scheduled. I was still struggling with a lot of different chronic health issues. I still felt like my lymph nodes were super swollen. They would start to feel a little bit better, and then they'd come back and be super swollen. I still was dealing with an ongoing cough and just that gut disruption. I ended up testing my gut with some functional labs that I provide through Haren Holistic's functional lab testing, and I got a GI map back, which is a stool analysis. I found out that I had a lot of the markers for celiacs, which was crazy, and so I totally cut out gluten, and it honestly helped my gut so much. I didn't consume a ton of gluten before, and if I did, it was always organic, it was always sourdough, sprouted when possible, all of this. But my body was so inflamed at a foundational level that I just couldn't handle that last year. And my diet, I just really started to experience a lot of these other issues related to histamine intolerance and all of this. So if you're unfamiliar with how mold impacts your body at a microbiome level, essentially the mycotoxins get into your body. And if your body isn't able to detox the mycotoxins or there's an overload, essentially it can cause almost an autoimmune response within the body where your body's trying to amp up and fight against these pathogens. And there's a huge histamine response that goes on. It can lead to immune dysregulation where your body just has a hard time fighting off other illnesses that come your way. And you can just become intolerant to a lot of foods and a lot of different environmental factors that you were not intolerant to before because your body's on high alert. You're in this histamine storm and your body just needs to calm it down. It needs to be able to relax and needs to be able to not fight off all of these toxins anymore. It's exhausted, it's fatigued, all of this. So I have a few theories on the whole mold illness thing. And here's the thing. I think getting a diagnosis can be helpful sometimes because you're like, okay, wow, I'm not going crazy. Like this actually is happening within my body, all of this. At other times, I think diagnoses are way overused. I've been given a lot of diagnoses by different medical practitioners this last year. And to be honest, I don't want another diagnosis. I just want to know how to be able to heal and support my body to move past this season. I am not living with mold illness for the rest of my life. Hell no. I think a lot of other people who are experiencing chronic illness do not want to live with that for the rest of their lives. And if we label ourselves with a chronic illness, even if they say it's something you'll have till you die, I think that we almost become a bit of a slave to that. And I just don't want to live with that mentality. I don't want to live with that in my mind, that this is just something I have to live with the rest of my life, or something that's going to cater to further problems down the road where I'm not going to be able to fix those things. So that's just a little random side tangent, but that's just a little bit of my mindset behind some of this. But I have a few theories about the mold stuff. Like, why do some people get sicker than others when exposed to mold? Now, there's many different things out there. If you look this up online, you'll probably get so many different responses. But two of my main theories here are, one, the stress bucket, which if you've been following along with me for a while, you know I refer to this quite a bit. But our body, if you imagine we're carrying around this bucket and different stressors get poured into the bucket. We have physical stressors, we have emotional stressors, we have environmental stressors, we have all of these different things. We have illness, we have moving, we have relationships. Our bucket can only hold so much of these stressors before it starts to overflow. And at that point, it's too much. The flow is going steady and strong, and our bucket's just overflowing, and our body just can't keep up in order to handle all of these different stressors. So I believe that as someone, my theory is that if someone has a stress bucket that is already filled or almost to the brim, and then you are exposed to a major environmental stressor like mold or something along those lines, then it is going to significantly impact the body's capacity and ability to cope with that stressor. My second theory is that there are certain things like genetic things like genetic methylation and detox, like the MTHFR, gene mutation, all of these things. I try to be very careful when I talk about genetics, because here's the thing. There's been so much research over the last handful of years that we can actually turn on and turn off specific genes in our body through lifestyle modifications, through diet, through exercise, through all of these things. I kind of view the whole MTHFR thing the same as a diagnosis thing. So where it's like, okay, yes, I did test positive for the MTHFR gene mutation, and that gene is turned on right now. And I am having issues with detoxing and methylating and processing toxins in my body to get them out. Yes, I am more likely to have these toxins circulate within my body during the season of life. But I also don't think that that is just that's not my death sentence right there. This is just a piece of the puzzle that we're looking at that might be a little bit valuable in us looking at the holistic picture here. So knowing that I personally have the MTHFR gene mutation at this moment in this season of my life, I have opted to focus on only taking supplements that are already in either a methylated or already bioavailable form. So the issue when you have methylation issues in your body is sometimes your body cannot take certain forms of vitamins and supplements. It cannot process them and utilize them in a way to their fullest extent. And sometimes even it can build up into a toxic level within the body because your body is having a hard time breaking them down. So that's just a simple thing I do. But to be honest, I think everybody should be taking either methylated forms of vitamins and supplements or already bioavailable forms of vitamins and supplements anyways, regardless of if you have the MTHFR gene mutation. So like I said, a little piece of the puzzle, but not the whole thing. I also believe that we have to remind ourselves that, and not just remind ourselves, we have to truly deeply believe that our body has the ability to heal given the right tools and the right environment. And I truly believe that. I have seen far too many miracles happen in the wellness world to not believe this. I think that if we believe our illness or our sickness is just that's it for us, then it might be it for us if that's what we believe. But we have to push past that and believe that we are able to heal given the right tools. So, amidst all of this remediation, my husband and I started to get really, really sick again. And this was last October. It was right after my birthday. I just had my 30th birthday. There was a bunch of illness going around in the fall, and we both got really sick. But my husband and I, we were living in our travel trailer because we had moved into our travel trailer while we were doing all this remediation on our house. At this time, we literally did not get out of bed from the travel trailer except to like eat and go to the bathroom. It was at least 2 weeks, and we both felt like we were not getting better. And it actually took the point of I had a dream one night. I think I was 3 weeks into this sickness in November at this point, and I actually had a dream that I never got better, that I was going to be sick forever, and that there was mold growing in my travel trailer. And so the next morning, after I woke up and I remembered that dream very vividly, very clearly, I was like, okay, I'm going to look through every corner of this travel trailer because I feel like for some reason something is making our mold illness a lot worse right now. I'm starting to experience this vertigo again. I'm starting to experience the really bad gut issues. I'm starting to have some hives and just chronic migraines. And just horrible overall feeling, and the cough and the sinus pressure and all of that. The next morning, lo and behold, all it took was I was looking in the first window, right where our heads were touching the window in the travel trailer. I lifted the shade up, and there was black mold growing all over that window, all over the curtain, right there, right by our heads in our travel trailer. So this spurred a whole another mental breakdown because at this point, I quite literally felt like I could not escape the mold. I was like, this stuff is slowly killing me right now, and it's literally freaking everywhere. And I remember I had a flashback to a conversation with a dear friend who was also experiencing some major mold issues last year. And she was like, mold is literally of the devil. Like, you think you've killed it, you think you've remediated it, and then it just pops up somewhere else. And that was exactly how I felt in this instance. I had almost been able to sit in a sense of relief that like our house is almost done, like we're getting rid of the molds and we're taking care of this. And then this popped up and just spurred a whole nother downward spiral with my health. And it just so happened that right around this week we were going to be able to move back into our home. So it was honestly perfect timing for this. Our mattress that we had ordered and our bed we had ordered had just arrived, and all I needed were some new linens for the bed, and then we were able to go into the house. But if you are dealing with mold, I'm sure you get this, but it just really freaking pops up everywhere. Like, you can't even look at mushrooms or blue cheese the same ever again. You're just like, this is all mold, essentially. So it just really impacts you at a deep level, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. And so we were able to move back into our house. We had those dehumidifiers in there. We had air purifiers in every room. And it was around this time I was like, you know what? I think now's the time. Like I said, we should have done this months ago. I think we need to have this full-blown mold inspection company come out and just make sure we've done all right with the remodel. And I need to make sure that there's no major colonies that are growing right now in our house, especially since this roof's been leaking for a while, all of these little things. So we had this mold company come out. I'll link their information down in the show notes as well. I would recommend starting here. If you are living in a home that you cannot get out of, or if you are looking to buy a home, I would do this inspection prior to purchasing and all of this to know what you're truly dealing with. Now, the reason I opted for this company, I hired Mold Finders, I believe is their name. Oh, that's their Instagram name. I'll put their actual, it's called We Inspect. I will put their actual website and name down in the show notes. But the reason I hired them over the many other different mold testing companies, over just doing the ERMI test myself, doing all this, is because they take multiple different samples. They essentially get a full holistic picture of what the microbiome of your home is, what the microbiome of the environment outside of your home is. And get this, our house was only just over 900 square feet. They spent over 6 hours doing a very thorough inspection on our home. And that made me feel like it was my money well spent because I knew they were being thorough. I knew they were taking pictures of literally everything. Areas of concern. They found areas with water damage in my house that I did not even know about. They found cracks in the Venetian plaster in the ceiling that I was like, this is brand new, and I still never noticed that. And they just pointed out things that I wouldn't have really thought of, like the distance of our gutter spouts away from our house, and if that water pooling around our house will contribute to more moisture issues in the future. But going back to the specific lab tests that they do. So not only did they do the ERMI test, which I'm sure if you're in the mold holistic health world, you've heard of the ERMI test. You can essentially buy them yourself and put them around your house and do these tests to see what kind of mold you're dealing with. They don't just do those. They did a bunch of different other types of tests. They actually took pictures with a thermal camera that sensed areas of moisture in the walls. And then if there was an area of concern, they would poke a small hole in the wall. They would put a tube in there and actually take an air sample from within the wall cavity to see if there was an issue with mold in the walls. Now, I just appreciated this sense of thoroughness here. And when I got the results back, it was really actually quite empowering because I was able to see what specific types of mold we were dealing with. And that just knowing that information right there, which types of mold spores I'm dealing with, was so valuable in me addressing my health from a holistic perspective because for different types of mycotoxins that you're exposed to, different types of molds, you need different treatment plans. It's not going to be the same for everyone who's exposed to mold. Each mold impacts the body in a different way. The specific ones that my husband and I were dealing with had a strong affinity for our kidneys, for our immune system, and we had been seeing those issues arise. I knew my body wasn't detoxing very well. I kept getting weird pain in my kidneys every time I got sick. And we both just kept getting literally every illness that was going around, and we just weren't getting better. And so just knowing that information from my own mycotoxin health panel that I did, and then aligning that with the results from the mold inspection in the house gave me a lot of peace of mind that like, okay, these do line up. The mycotoxins I'm seeing in my body right now do line up with the mold report that they got from our house. So these are very much related and very much have to do with one another. And so that was really powerful for me. And then I was able to know, okay, I need to be focusing on these specific binders in my wellness protocol. I need to work on a lot of kidney support here for myself. I need to work on immune system function and take a very individualized approach to my wellness with those specific results. So that was that. Once I got the mold report back, that was extremely valuable. We do now have to remediate a few more areas in our home. The main areas of concern are our attic and basement now, just with poor ventilation and just that moisture buildup from that roof leak, all of that. And so we will have to have that be addressed here soon. I'll probably have to follow up with you on how all of that goes. But I kind of want to shift gears in this podcast episode right now to talk about if you are living in a home that is either prone to mold or you know there might be a mold issue, or you're having to live in this home before you can fully remediate, I want to talk about some simple things that you can do to help with the environment in there. Like I mentioned before, I recommend using dehumidifiers in every room, especially the bathroom, especially the kitchen, where when you're cooking and things like that, a lot of humidity is created. You want to try to keep that humidity below 50%. The ideal range for the home is around 30 to 50%. Now, I'm a previous desert dweller, and we just got our wood stove installed finally, and this has made a huge difference. Putting the wood stove in the winter here brought our home's humidity down. The lowest I've seen so far is 11%. And I'm like, Yes. Like, I don't even care if my skin dries out at this point. I just want it dry as the desert in here. Like, that is great. And so it's actually only been 2 weeks of having the wood burning stove in our home, but I have seen a drastic difference. My allergies that I was experiencing started to go down. My skin is clearing up more. I have more energy. My brain fog is much less, thank the Lord. All of this. Another crazy thing. So I didn't know this until I had these little humidity readers all around my house, but opening the windows actually makes a huge difference. I'm not even kidding. Even on days when it was like slightly drizzling outside and the humidity in our house was like 50%, it was right on the threshold, I would open a couple windows and it would bring those humidity readers down to into like the 40s range. And that was where I wanted it to be. So even if it's freezing cold outside, even if you think it's more damp or moist outside than in your home, if you have those humidity readers, you can easily see how opening windows or how turning on certain fans in your house or how turning on the vents impacts the humidity in your house. I always use the hood vent when I'm cooking on the stove, when I'm cooking in the oven, just because a lot of warmth and humidity is created in the kitchen when you're cooking. I always open the window when I do laundry in the laundry room, because just the washer going in there brings that humidity up significantly. In the shower, now this is a good one. So this is my shower protocol right here. This is funny because I never knew that those little shower squeegees that you like clean the glass with actually served a functional purpose. I literally thought they just existed to keep the smear watermarks from getting on your glass shower door. No, they serve a functional purpose. So let me get into my shower routine here real quick. So I walk into the bathroom, I turn on the lights and also the vent in the shower area. I make sure my little dehumidifier in there is on turbo mode and that the reservoir is emptied. And then I crack the window in the shower. And then I take a shower. I like really hot showers, so it definitely still gets a little bit steamy in there and everything. But at the end of my shower, before I get out, it only takes like maybe a minute max. I squeegee all of the walls. I take all of the moisture down with the squeegee and I pull it all the way to the drain. And you would be amazed how much water there is that's actually just sitting on the walls. Imagine if my vents weren't on. Imagine if my window wasn't open and there wasn't a place for all this moisture to go as it was drying. So I squeegee all that water down into the drain, and then I take a towel and I dry the walls and the floor of the shower. I know this sounds excessive, but if you have dealt with mold related symptoms, you understand you'd do anything to avoid that feeling ever again. And then I don't have a shower mat that just sits outside my shower all the time that stays wet and damp and gets mildewy or anything. I just use a clean towel that I put on the ground, and then after I step on it, after I dry off, I throw it right into the washing machine to wash. We don't leave wet or damp towels laying around anywhere in our home because our home is very mold prone, and just any bit of moisture like that is really going to create an environment for more mold to grow. That's the shower routine right there. I hope that helps. I also have a little reel of that on my Instagram if you want a visual to go along with that. A huge thing if you're living in a mold prone area or a home where you are concerned about mold is meticulous cleaning. Now, I know it's excessive, but pet hair, dust, anything that's sitting around and accumulating dust and dander and all of that, that is what mold loves to grow on. I have two big, furry, hairy dogs that shed everywhere, and they probably make my life 20 times harder than it needs to be, but I love them to death, and I can't imagine life without them. But we have to be meticulous with our cleaning efforts. I have to change the sheets every couple days. I have to vacuum every day because there is dog hair everywhere, and I just do not want the mold to be able to grab a hold of that and grow on there. As far as cleaning goes, one of my favorite cleaning products for mold is by Force of Nature, and it's actually hypochlorous acid. Literally, all it is salt water and vinegar, and you put it into this little thing that you plug in and it ionizes it. I think that's the word. It adds an electrical charge to it essentially, and it makes it as powerful as at killing things as bleach, but it's totally non-toxic. Now you never want to use bleach or harsh chemicals on mold because it can quite literally cause a chemical reaction that then you are breathing in to your lungs, and it can cause a lot of health issues. So hypochlorous acid has been my go-to. It's great. It's just vinegar and salt water. If you're sensitive to smells and things like that, it's an awesome cleaning solution. I love it. It cleans the windows. I use it to clean everything in my house. Another thing I love to do is I love to diffuse some essential oils. I can be really sensitive to smells, even if they are essential oils. So I'm very careful with this, but if it's very humid or I know that there's been a lot of moisture in our house, I will diffuse thieves. I don't know the other name for it, but essentially it's like cinnamon, cloves, citrus, these things. And it's been clinically proven in research studies to actually mitigate mold spores in the air. So that's another thing I like to do to help purify the air, along with using air purifiers in my different rooms. Now, as far as supporting the body through, so that's kind of supporting your environment if you're living in a mold prone spot. Now, supporting the body. So, your protocols with supplements, with binders like charcoal and zeolite and all that, it's going to be totally unique to you and your circumstances that you're going through. The stress you've been under, your mineral status, like what does your hair tissue mineral analysis look like right now? How is your body handling the stress? You might want to address that first before you dive into a very specific protocol so you can take a more tailored approach to everything. But generally speaking, I want to talk about a few things that I believe can be supportive to overall detox function in the body, no matter what you're dealing with. So I would always work with a practitioner to go through this stuff. I would do your own research, make sure it's even applicable to you and your situation, learn about the specific molds that you're dealing with, and then learn how to address those. But these are a few of the things that have been super helpful to me with my specific symptoms. So I've really gained a lot of value from taking bile salts, also known as TUDCA, UDCA. If you look it up, you can learn a lot more about it, but there's a specific supplement that I like, and it mimics bile bindings approaches for detox. Now, if you went to a regular doctor, physician, and they were putting you on a really elaborate protocol for mold detox, they would likely prescribe you a very strong prescription binder that essentially I found that bile salts and TUDCA are like an alternative to what they might prescribe you. So that's what I opted for, and that just helps with the bile, helps to detox the liver better and get things moving in the digestive tract more. Magnesium. Huge advocate for magnesium here. We know magnesium is one of the very first minerals that's depleted during times of stress. Magnesium is essential for enzymatic reactions within the body to help balance other minerals, to help with organ function, literally everything that creates life, vitality, energy, all of that. And when our body is depleted of magnesium, we struggle. Our cells struggle to make energy, to recover, to keep us well. And so this has just been a non-negotiable in my protocol, is just to use different types of magnesium. So I like to get this in different ways. Sometimes I take capsules of magnesium before I go to bed. I also really like putting on a topical lotion or oil before I go to bed. And then I really love sensory deprivation float therapy. And you're just absorbing so much Epsom salt and magnesium through your skin when you do that's just been a really great way for me to just mega dose magnesium download into my body like once a month or so. Now, the other essential thing is electrolytes. We know electrolytes are valuable, but they are extra super valuable for helping support detox pathways. And if you are working on getting all of these mycotoxins out, if you're working on a lot of detox and you're stripping your body of a lot of these essential minerals and nutrients along with the bad stuff, the mycotoxins, the heavy metals, all of that, it's likely that you're going to be depleted in electrolytes too. So just really staying on top of that, adding electrolytes to your water, making sure your potassium to sodium to calcium to magnesium ratios are ideal. That is huge. Yes. So as far as like diet and nutrition went, so I was using a lot of bone broth and stuff for my gut when I was having all these gut issues. But when I went home for Christmas last year, just back in December, I ended up having a major flare up. And so I was sleeping in a family member's room in their house, and I woke up the next day with my signature mold symptoms. I had vertigo, I had a migraine, I felt really nauseous, I actually started puking, I had hives, and my eyes were very swollen, and my sinuses as well. And it was really odd because I was like, okay, these must be my signature mold symptoms. I think there's mold in this room that I slept in. The only other times I've ever had all of these exact same symptoms was when I found the mold in my travel trailer and when I found the mold in my house. And lo and behold, we found black mold growing in the window sill by the bed that I had slept in that night. And so immediately we got me out of that room and into a better spot with more airflow and all of that. And we just monitored my health. And this was the scariest flare up I've had all year. I thought I was doing pretty good up to this point. I thought I was getting remediated. I thought I had really had a grasp on all of this and the mycotoxins were working their way out. And then this happened at Christmas time, and it sort of just shifted all of my mold symptoms that I had been experiencing. From that point on, until the last couple weeks, I have been struggling with severe allergic reactions, and not just to mold, but just to a lot of different things. And so this is when I knew that the histamine levels in my body were just out of control, and my body essentially was like just going crazy to try to get this histamine storm down. And so the last month, I have just been working on really totally making sure I'm getting my mycotoxins down, making sure I'm having a bowel movement every day, making sure my liver and kidneys are supported with herbs, with supplements, all of this, because the allergic reactions I have been having this last month have been very, very scary. They have been nearly anaphylactic level. And I am scared that if I'm very closely exposed to mold spores in the air again, that it could be very serious. One thing that helped me through the major flare up was my homeopathic remedies. And if you follow along with me on Instagram, you know that I'm a huge fan of homeopathy. And there's a lot of clearing that we'll have to do in the backstory of my life and healing and all of that. But right now it's more of like survival mode, like get through the storm as well as we can. And then we're going to kind of work our way back and start building those greater foundations. But I would reach for my APIS. Now, APIS is known as the homeopathic EpiPen, so to speak. And I truly believe on Christmas that that is what saved me from having to go to the hospital, because there was a point where my breathing was getting very shallow. My face had swelled up. I had the hives on my face, and I was just terrified that I was not going to be able to breathe. And I dosed that APIS like every 5 minutes until I got to more of a stable spot. And then I started dosing some histamine to help with the histamines that I was dealing with. So was able to move forward in that way from that major flare. At this time, I also had to start shifting my diet a little bit, because a lot of the things I was eating were considered really high histamine foods, like my daily bone broth. I freaking love my daily bone broth, and it was really good for my gut. But broth is one of those things, bone broth is one of those things that's really high in histamines. And if you're having an issue with that, it's going to be with the histamine intolerance, it's going to be really important to avoid having leftover foods, to avoid having any meat that has been cooked and then has sat on the counter or sat in the fridge for a few hours even. It's best to just freeze foods right away and then heat them up when you want them, just to ensure that those histamines haven't built up and that your body won't have a negative reaction to them. So that's been a huge adjustment the last month. I've just had to shift a lot of that around exercise and movement. I've just had to listen to my body. My recovery hasn't been as great this last year. I would do a strength training workout and then I would feel like it would take me weeks to recover, even if I wasn't lifting a lot. So this last year, I've totally shifted my workout routine and regimen. And now I mainly do Pilates twice a week, which I love because it's very gentle on my body. And on days when I'm not feeling super great, I can take the springs down significantly. And on days when am feeling great, I can up the springs and I can up the intensity, and just really not have that pounding on my joints, but still feel like I'm getting some good resistance training in. I've also been focusing on consistent daily walks. Just the movement of walking helps with the lymphatic flow within our bodies. And that's just a huge detox pathway within us. And so doing that daily has been awesome. I've also just been focusing on doing the things that feel really healing to my body, like going out cross country skiing. And it might not look like it used to. I might not be doing miles on miles and trying to sprint and do intervals and all this, although I dream of the day I can do that again. It's just really beautiful to be outside and be able to move in a way that is supportive to my body and not adding more stress to it, but still allows me to get out there and do things and feel like I'm really living life to the fullest still amidst the healing journey. Now, a few things I just want to touch on as I'm closing up this episode here. The mindset and the ongoing journey of mold. And I think it's just so important. Like I said, there's been many curveballs in this journey, and mold pops up when you least expect it. I think focusing on resiliency through the storm is huge. And just the fact that to know that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. I've heard too many stories of people just reversing their chronic illness to believe that that's not possible for me. And a huge step in that has just been my ability to refuse to accept a permanent mold illness or celiac identity, but just to believe in my body's inherent ability to heal, given the time, proper resources, and the reduction of my toxic load. Now, there were a lot of moments this last year where I really just wanted to go get a lab test done, or I really just wanted to go get a scan or talk with a practitioner and have a simple answer, a simple out. And that's just not the case. I mean, I hate to break it to you. It's not just going to be one supplement. It's not just going to be one protocol that brings you through this. It is going to be a lot of time, attention, intention, and true deep healing that happens along this ride. And it's not just going to be physical healing, it's going to take a lot of soul healing as well. And I think maybe if you've read the book The Body Keeps the Score, you understand how emotional traumas, how mental traumas, how past traumas, things like that affect the body. And when you have a huge flare up in your health, such as with mold illness, or maybe you have Lyme's, or maybe you have some other thing that you are dealing with that is quite triggered at the moment, all of these other things are going to come flooding in. And you need to be patient with yourself and give yourself grace to properly sort through these things. You're not in a rush here. You can take your time, and there's going to be a lot of things that I think come up in your journey that you're like, wow, wasn't expecting this to come up in my mold journey, but seems like I need to address that and seems like I need to create peace with that and then move forward. And I think that's just giving your body the space and the time and the energy to heal. Because if we're trying to heal a mold, but there's a lot of these other things from the past that are coming up, or a lot of things from the present that are causing stress, we're just going to be going in a vicious cycle. So just realizing that it's going to take work, but that there is a lot of hope, I think that's just a huge part of the journey. And hopefully hearing my story and some of the things that's been able to help me can help you too, and help you feel not so alone. if I could go back to day one, I want to share this. If I could go back to day one of finding mold in my house, here's exactly what I would do. I would have instantly created better boundaries in my life. I would have said no to absolutely everything that did not contribute to my healing, to my success, to the betterment of the environment around me. I would have said yes to absolutely everything that filled my soul, that filled my cup, that helped me feel like my body was safe and able to heal on its own time. I would not create any excuses not to go outside. In fact, it's been shown in studies that a lot of the individuals that end up getting cancer are stay-at-home moms because they tend to stay at home most of the day inside the house with toxic construction materials, maybe toxic mold, different types of metals, exposures, things like that. We need to be getting outside for at least a couple hours every day. And that's just a non-negotiable for me now. I wouldn't be in here recording this podcast now if I hadn't gotten my time outside already today. And I did already get that, but I'm going to be going outside right after this again too. Breathe in that fresh air. That's what our bodies need. I would have opted, if I could go back to day one, I would have opted for smart binders. I would have ditched charcoal. I would have ditched the other binders, the clays, all of those things that they say you need to take to get rid of toxins in your body. I would have opted for a smart binder like zeolite. Now, I'll share my favorite zeolite in the show notes here, but the one I have found is very pure. They test it for purity. They test it for heavy metals. It's essentially an earth mineral. And it's called a smart binder because it's supposed to magnetize toxins in the body to itself. It actually recognizes which particles are toxins and which ones are not. And it magnetizes the toxins. It carries them out through your bile. And it's actually a remineralized form of zeolite. So what's valuable about this is it's not just like taking a bunch of charcoal and bentonite clay and you're just clearing out your system. That's going to strip you of so many essential vitamins and minerals as well. It's not going to carry out just the bad stuff. It's going to carry out the good stuff too. This zeolite that I use does not do that. And I wish I knew about this day one because I would have started taking it right away to avoid that mycotoxin buildup. I would have instantly started taking kidney and liver supporting herbs as well. I would have focused on like dandelion root, orange peel, ginger, just these anti-inflammatory detox pathway supporting herbs, milk thistle, things like that, to just support my body's detox pathways. I would have gotten those dehumidifiers day one. I also would have done, this is so simple, and I wish I would have known this back then. I do this all the time now, even when I'm traveling. Sinus rinses before bed. So I just have this little saline sinus rinse and I just spray it in both of my nostrils before I go to bed. Now, different bacteria and molds and things like that really love to grow in our sinus cavity. And if we aren't clearing that out on a daily basis, if we've got congestion in there, we're just going to be breathing in and breeding more of those. And so it's a super, super valuable thing that I would have liked to have known day one. I would have avoided public saunas at all costs. Now, this is a very important one. I was using the sauna religiously in a public gym because I felt like it was helping detox my body. And I have been using saunas regularly for years and have felt amazing from them. Until I was dealing with the mold last year and I started feeling really sick after I was using the sauna. Like my gut issues and my stomach cramping I was having was 20x after I would get out of the sauna. And I was like, this is weird. I feel like I'm having a really negative reaction to the sauna, which has never happened before. And I started doing some research and I found that saunas are really the perfect environment for mold to grow in. And I wasn't surprised because the very specific sauna that I was using, it was one in a public gym and people would go swim laps in the pool and they'd be soaking wet and then they come sit in the sauna and it'd just always be kind of damp and kind of musty in there, even though it's supposed to be a dry sauna. Lo and behold, I found out that this specific gym was dealing with some lawsuits in regards to black mold later on this year. And I truly believe that sauna was just ridden with mold. And I was just breathing that in there. And it was just really exaggerating a lot of my symptoms I was dealing with too. If I could go back to day one, I would stop using those public saunas. I would have possibly, if it was within my budget, I would have opted for my own sauna in my own house, and definitely some red light therapy as well to help with mitochondrial support. I would have also done that mold testing and inspection, the full blown one with all the different labs. I would have done that day one. That would have saved us a lot of time, energy, and probably money. Even though it seemed like a big expense back then, it would have been far more worth it to figure out how to make it possible to do that day one versus doing the remodel and then doing this now. And now we're going to possibly have to go back and fix some of those things. So if I could put everything into summary here, like early detection and professional mold testing are just invaluable in this journey. If you're dealing with this mold and you don't have specific direction, you kind of feel like you're just throwing a bunch of random things at it, whether it's your house or your own health in the mold equation, like get some hard numbers through testing, get to know which molds you're dealing with so you can have a specific plan in place to address that. Environmental control is really valuable in the house. Lowering that humidity, doing the thorough cleaning, all of this can significantly reduce your exposure. And comprehensive individualized detox support, like getting a smart binder, working on a diet that's individualized to you, and keeping up with movement is so vital for healing. I know there's days where you feel like not moving at all. There's days where your brain's not going to work. There's days where you feel like your gut is just destroyed, but movement and getting outside is going to be the best possible thing. Even there were days where I was like, I don't think I can move, but I was like, I need to get fresh air. I would turn on the outdoor fire pit and I would just go sit on my porch and just sit outside. Even if it was freezing cold, I'd layer up and I'd just go be out there to get some fresh air in. Anyways, that concludes it for this episode here. If you want to learn more, if you want to pick my brain about the specifics in this, be sure to follow me on Instagram at Haren Holistics, HarenHolistics. You'll get ongoing updates and detailed snippets of our journey on there. You can also visit my website, HarenHolistics.com, where you can find more about the functional lab testing that I offer, like the GI map, the hair tissue mineral analysis, as well as the homeopathy services that I offer as well. Now, I just want to leave you with one final bit of encouragement. And while mold illness is extremely serious and very debilitating, recovery is possible through consistent effort, if you have the proper support, and if you continue to remind yourself that healing really, truly is in your future. I hope this leaves you encouraged. I hope you have some resources to grab and run with from this episode. And I'll catch you in the next episode of the Holistic Ascent Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to leave me a 5-star review. It really means a lot. And also, you can leave a comment. Let me know what you found valuable, what you want to learn more about. That just really helps me guide the direction of my content as well. And anyways, cheers to you and your health.